Welcome to the TruthXChange podcast, unique program where we have conversations about worldview, all through the lens of oneism and twoism. This lens is based on Romans 1:25. We've exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worship and serve creation rather than the creator who is blessed forevermore. I'm your host, Joshua Gilo.
And I'm your co-host, Mary Weller.
And we've got Dr. Jones with us today.
Glad to be with you guys.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
It's been so hard to schedule you. I feel like it's hard for us to get you to come onto our podcast. So this is an honor.
Well,
today is a bit more of an advertisement day where we are going to discuss this upcoming symposium that we have scheduled for this year. Last year, our online symposium was the state of our disunion, where we had some veteran and some rookie lineup of speakers. This year, we have the same scenario with veterans and rookie speakers. The 2022 symposium, which will be in September, Stolen Identity, the Theft of the Binary in Contemporary Society. And this is how we are describing it. We're describing it like last year with a set of questions. What are your pronouns? What's your Enneagram number? How do you identify? What is a woman? These current cultural questions are a restatement of one of the oldest questions of the human race. Who am I? Today's answers carry a beguiling temptation to define ourselves by looking within, whereas the older version implies that we should look outside ourselves, asking our Creator to tell us what we need to know. Whether in the church or the White House, at home, or in our nation's schools, many in our culture, including Christians, are facing an identity crisis. And if we fall prey to the deceptive influences that tear us away from our ties to the Maker, the Creator and Savior, we wind up in a oneness world. At TruthXChange, we're excited to present our latest symposium, Stolen Identity, the Theft of the Binary in Contemporary Society. This will remind Christians that the only place we can safely ground our identity is in God, in the binary truth of twoism, where God and the creation are distinct and where distinction is a good thing for our identity.
Amen.
So as I said, we have a lineup of some veterans, and then we have some rookie speakers this year. Some of the veterans like Carl Teichrib, Mary Weller, Stephen Shavura, Dr. Jones, Mark Robinson. For our new lineup of speakers will be Samuel Say, Emilio Ramos, and Eowyn Stoddard.
I'm so excited about this lineup of speakers. I feel weird not being counted as a rookie, but just hearing that list of speakers and knowing what they're going to be talking about, thinking about Mark Robinson's presentation last year and knowing what he's going to speak about this year, having gotten to know about Samuel Say and knowing that he's coming on board this year, reading Eowyn's work and just knowing her and knowing that she's going to come with that wealth of experience and insight. I am so excited. And I'm amazed, we worked together on this description as a staff team, and it seemed relevant at the time, but gosh, Joshua, hearing you read it now, today, it's like we reached into yesterday's headlines. It's only become more relevant, I think, since we began planning this. And I thank God for that through your work and your insight, Dr. Jones, that we're able to put something like this together that I think is going to be phenomenally important and helpful to Christians in the pews and in the community who want to know how to talk about this stuff and how to think through this stuff. I'm really excited.
I think you're right. I think we were not realizing when we came up with the subject and the title exactly what we were putting our finger on. And in the providence of God, I think it is the overwhelmingly important issue of our day, namely the question of identity. I
Yes.
thought of my book, which I'll show here, of Stolen Identity, which in a way has nothing to do with the subject of our symposium in a certain sense, though that book with that title, Stolen Identity, is actually how liberals stole or tried to steal the identity of Jesus
Yes.
as God's son, teaching biblical truth to a Gnostic spiritualist. They tried
Hmm.
to make Jesus make his identity the identity of a pagan Gnostic.
Mm.
And it so turns out that that book tried to show that they were wrong and that we must hold on to the biblical presentation of Jesus. Now, of course, in our symposium, we will not specifically do that, but essentially that's what we will be also trying to do,
Hmm.
which is maintain an orthodox view of identity, both the identity of Christ and the identity of the human being.
Well, it's interesting, Peter, to hear you say that, because Christ is the second Adam, and Adam and Eve were created in God's image. And so the flow of that, I think that's the second book of yours I ever read. I read it right after I read Cracking Da Vinci's Code, I believe. And what amazed me in reading that book, Stolen Identity, was how, in seeing some of the lies that even within the Christian church, we hear things within the culture about who Christ is supposedly as this great teacher, or, you know, one of many. And certainly that's not preached in the church, but we just have that swirl around us. And you broke down so many of those lies about who Christ was. And through that book caused me to love Jesus more.
Mhm.
And so then in loving Jesus more, and then doing the work I'm doing right now, where I'm looking a lot in Genesis 1-3, and then thinking about Christ as the second Adam, it all flows together beautifully. And again, it's just amazing to me how scripture never becomes irrelevant.
No, but as well, the subject that I sort of dealt with in that book is just as relevant now because,
Yes.
and I don't know whether some of our listeners know this, is that Gnosticism is the deliberate refusal of God as the creator. And therefore, people need to find out who they are without the notion of a creator.
Mm.
And they try to discover themselves as spiritual beings that they create themselves.
Right.
So, in a certain sense, the kind of debate about which I was speaking without realizing that we were projecting ourselves into the future is really the exact issue of today, which is that the world has more and more become Gnostic, more and more rejecting anything like the notion of a creator. And therefore, we have to invent our own explanation of who we are. And obviously, we will not accept the notion that God is the creator of who we are. And so we'll make ourselves into who we think we should be. And that is a thoroughly Gnostic way of proceeding. And so we are really moving into a much more powerful period of Gnosticism, I think, than we would have imagined.
Mm.
Yeah. You know, that's interesting, Peter. I keep thinking, as you're talking about these children's books that I've been dealing with, and how so much of what is taught to these children is that when you're born, your body is just sort of this package, almost an irrelevant package. And so when you're born, the people taking care of you, they're taking care of the package and they're raising you, but there's a place where the child reaches a point where they can tell people who they actually are. So it's not that you are this person who has been made, but it's almost more you're evolving to a place where you can determine your identity. It really is a self-creation.
Right.
So it is this whole alternative creation narrative. Is that some of what you're dealing with in your talk for this coming symposium?
Yeah, let me see. I deal in this talk with 4 points. How has our identity been stolen? That's my first point.
Mhm.
What is our identity? And it's the image of God. And I look there into the biblical teaching on that. The third element I talk about is giving ourselves or stealing identity is idolatry. I want to describe exactly what it means for people to refuse God's gift of image and creating one's own image, which is idolatry. And then my final point, which is sort of discouraging, is that produces ultimate cultural chaos.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I sort of arrive at a very discouraging view of the future culture.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Speaking of culture, as I'm writing this stuff, I realize that I'm going through my entire life. I'm an old man, and when I was younger, I came to the States in 1964.
Right.
And I always used to say, when I came to the States, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, because I'd never seen a culture so Christian. Christianity was absolutely everywhere, on television, on the radio, in colleges, obviously in thousands of churches all over the place, and in Christian ministries. And I'd never seen anything like that. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven.
Did it seem genuine, Peter? Because as a 40 something, we hear about these references to like the Christian past of America, almost as if it were simply a veneer. But it sounds to me like it seemed very genuine to you in very real ways.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously you always have phony stuff and all, and
Sure.
superficial Christianity. Yeah, I realize that, but I also realize that people ran their lives without necessarily being spiritual or on some kind of biblical basis. I always remember being surprised at seeing people in the grocery stores. One woman told the grocery gal that she'd given her the wrong change, and she gave back some of the change she shouldn't have got back
Oh, yeah.
back to the grocery girl. And I thought to myself, I don't think I'd see that in Europe. I think people would walk away and think they've
Interesting.
done a good job. So people tended to live, tended to live, according to biblical structures. Obviously, marriage was held in high esteem, and male and female was not questioned. There were lots of really good things about the America of the 60s.
Yeah.
But I watched how America of the 60s began to collapse. And that's what I've watched ever since. And that's why my books have tended to develop a cultural description, if you like, of our culture becoming more and more at the same time godless and Gnostic.
Mhm.
So that today, and it's not just America anymore. I listen to the BBC a lot, and it has gone in the same direction. It never speaks about Christianity anymore. It used to, but
Right.
BBC never does. It will present all kinds of weird things and think that they're present them as normative.
Mhm.
So the West, I think, has become less and less based upon a biblical view of existence. That's what I've seen. And now it is being based on all kinds of other things.
For your talk, or your theme is oneism and twoism and human identity. Have you pulled a title for your talk at this point, or are we letting the cat out of the bag too quickly here?
Well, the only title I gave myself was oneism or twoism, male or female. But that might need some help. So
you might need a biologist.
that's right. Exactly.
Oh boy, that was cheesy.
Oh, so, and yet.
All right, along with Dr. Jones on the virtual tour for the symposium is Carl Teichrib. He's going to be his talk, or his theme, global spirituality and personal identity. Now, let me say this real quick, is as we did last year, we'll be having interviews with each of our speakers to promote this symposium. So everyone's going to get a little bit of a foretaste of what's to come. So, and I've already done the podcast with Carl, and I'm really excited for his talk. And I'm not going to say anything until that episode comes out, which will be in the next couple of weeks. But Carl, this is not his first time with us. And he's a veteran of traveling and going to all kinds of pagan conferences like Burning Man and
Right.
Hagathon. Dr. Jones, did you have any comments that you wanted to add to Carl before we move on to the next speaker?
He is a good scholar as well. His latest book I read and endorsed, but I forget the name of it. Do you know the name of that? His latest book? It's a big, thick book.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. I should know that, but I do not.
I think Carl is one of those guys similar to you, Dr. Jones, where so much of what he was talking about, say even 10 years ago, seemed so fringy. You couldn't contemplate the idea of it becoming mainstream. And yet here we are.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested to hear his take now.
I'm amazed at all the places he goes to.
Yeah.
And he just tells people, well, he tells them he's doing research on what the particular group is focusing on. So
right.
I guess he doesn't come out right away and say, I'm a biblical scholar. Maybe he has a way of presenting himself that does not raise the hackles, but he does not hesitate in going to all these places like Burning Man and so on.
It's really remarkable.
And
Game of God.
A wonderful first-hand witness of what is going on the spiritual level.
Yeah. Joshua, we lost that. What was the title?
Game of Gods.
Game of Gods. Okay.
That's Carl's book.
Excellent.
And then after Carl is Mary Weller, Transgenderism, Creator, Creation, Reality.
Yes.
What's
with a longer title than I care to read off.
Joshua hates my title, but I can't get away from it. So it's like stealing from babies, the culture's attempt to take the image of God away from our children. So I am focusing very much on some of what we were referencing before at the beginning of this conversation, how educators and entertainers and publishers are all preaching this new creation narrative to our children in an attempt to kind of set the stage. You know, kids, they learn about the world by observing the real things around them. You know, mom is, especially, you know, when you think about younger kids watching mom as she has another baby, as she breastfeeds, as she takes care of this child, these very different roles between male and female that just come about because of the difference in our biology, the difference in the way that we were made. And I'm seeing younger and younger and younger aimed shows and books that are seeking to undermine, to not just to tell a false reality, but to re-explain the reality that children are existing in. I've got books that are aimed even as young as 3 years old, so pre-K, really seeking to undo that binary. So I want Christians to understand how this is being done and what a biblical Twoist response looks like, not only to our own children and the children within our church communities as we raise them up, but that within the culture, because the culture has a sense that this is very wrong. So even people who are not believers and don't have a biblical worldview, they see the truth of creation, and there's a discomfort, an acknowledgement of the disconnect that's happening between this new theology that's come out and the reality that we live in. And it's an opportunity then to evangelize and to talk about the beauty of who we are made to be by a creator, the beauty of objective truth, and just kind of unpacking all of that. I understand, Peter, your sense that we're really in trouble. We're really being led to chaos by all of this. But I also have this very hopeful sense that there are opportunities to speak about truth and about the unique truth that's presented in the Bible that I've never seen before until all of this came to pass. So it really is an evangelistic opportunity. So that's the focus of my talk.
Yeah, well, I guess what I was trying to say is it was a lot easier for me as a young person seeing how Christian people were in America.
Yes.
To not be so concerned about things, but that radical changes have taken place since the 60s, so that I think young people today simply think that's the way things always have been. And that's not true.
True.
I think transgenderism has made a step quite far where most people aren't willing to go.
Yes.
And at that point, you're right, Mary, that we can make something of that.
Yes.
That's obviously not the case with the next Supreme Court justice, but I think transgenderism really pushes the position so far that many people are not willing to go that far.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, Peter, because you're talking about a time when the Christian worldview was obvious culturally.
That's right.
In the 60s, Joshua and I are the product of going to high school in the 90s and the early 2000s, where all of a sudden Christianity and biblicism, they were just irrelevant. That's just how it got treated, was it's this nice thing, but it's just irrelevant.
That's right.
And so it was hard to even know how to engage or why to even say that it was important, that people understand things from a biblical perspective. And I feel like we're coming out on the other side of that now, because it's pushed so far to the other side that it is relevant. It is hopeful. Suddenly there are connections being made. It's like almost like we're coming out of almost like a sense of inertia. I'm struggling for the right word for it, but where it was all just kind of this amorphous uncaring. And this has pushed us so far that people are realizing they have to care again. And we have creational gospel related answers. So it's just interesting to see how that process has gone.
Yeah, I can't help but to wonder, or not wonder, but I can't help but to notice that some of the narrative for Christian ministers that struggle, that try to be relevant, are still using some of the age-old tactics of the emergent church from 20 years ago.
Yes.
And those didn't work then, and they're not going to work now what people need is a robust understanding of the creator-creationist distinction. What they need is Twoism in response to monism. And
Yeah.
I think that I share your optimism in that sense, Mary, that people are looking, that are outside the church, are saying, this is crazy. Get me off of this bus.
Yeah.
Give me something. Give me some hope. And the church should give them Twoism.
Yeah.
Right.
I was talking just very quickly. I was talking to a gentleman who writes for the Christian Post named Brandon Showalter recently. And he was telling me the same type of thing. He said, I have more people come to me now and say, I am a liberal, I am an atheist, and I don't understand what's going on, but only you Christians are saying true things right now. And so they're suddenly considering aspects of what we have to say that they never would have otherwise. And it's because of this. It's very, very interesting. So
yeah,
I'm just thinking of the incredible power of critical race theory and how all our students are being trained in universities to think in this particular woke direction.
yeah.
I have a book here that I'll show you that I'm almost 3/4 of the way through.
American
American
Awakening.
Awakening, which goes into how people have had their minds changed to think in terms of critical race theory and postmodernism, not believing in truth as such.
Yeah.
And the threat, this is the threat, is the threat of equity.
Yes.
Not equality, it's equity.
Equity.
But the point with equity is people have to tell you what it is. And it's people in power that will tell you what equity is. You won't tell people we're all equal, let's try and work things out. It's almost a totalitarian, powerful state that will sort of apply their notion of equity with which everyone has to agree. And that becomes the definition of who we are as human beings. So I'm just worried about the power of that movement. I agree with you that transgenderism is a fundamental questioning of the rightness of that position. But I do see it as all powerful in the universities and even in the schools.
Yeah, I just finished a book. You held up yours, so I'll hold up the one that I just finished, Race to the Bottom by Luke Rosiak. And in this book, he goes through the way that critical race theory, especially, and woke ideologies have been pushed even into elementary schools.
That's right.
And we had all read in the office, this was a number of years ago, but there's a less and less ridiculous seeming short story by Kurt Vonnegut called Harrison Bergeron. And he's envisioning a culture in the future where people who are too smart have these loud buzzers put in their ears to interrupt their too intelligent thoughts, so that to bring them down to average intelligence.
Yeah,
you know, people who are very good looking have to wear clown noses so that they are not so good looking that they make the average looking feel bad. People who are too strong must wear weights. And
sounds like equity.
It is, right? It seems that equality is making sure that everyone starts from the same starting line, and then they make of that race what they can. And equity says, no, we all have to finish at the same time, and we will slow you down. We will muck you up as much as possible to make sure that even if it's a poor ending, it's an ending that everyone shares. So you're seeing it in the universities, Peter. I think you would enjoy this book by Luke Rosiak, talking about how it's being pushed into elementary school systems and the documented proof of the damage this does to the very groups of children that they're claiming to help. It does tremendous damage to their grades and to their ability to even think rationally.
So I think you're right that we have a hold on reality in terms of males and females, and
Mhm.
transgenderism goes too far. I also think we can make a case for truth as such, whereas postmodernism tries to say there is no such thing as truth. Of course, the problem with that is you have to believe what the postmodernist says is true.
Mhm.
So if there's no such thing as truth, but that's a true statement, how can you make any true statements? And of course, people do want to make true statements. And so we're stuck with the problem of truth. And I think we have a good case to make a statement of truth based on the biblical testimony.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that I guess that segues into our next guest speaker, who is going to be a rookie with us this year, Samuel Say, who's a Canadian. He's going to be dealing with the topic of intersectionality.
Tell us about him. Who is he?
Samuel is a theological student right now, and he's good friends with Joe Boot up in Ontario, and he's a blogger. He has a blog called Slow to Write, and he has been I guess a voice of sanity over the past couple of years, dealing with this issue of critical race theory and wokeism and intersectionality. And so he's been given that topic to address, and he's done a number of interviews on the topic. So he's very well read on it, speaks very clearly on the subject. So we're delighted to have him on board with us for a first time.
I think he's a black guy, right?
Yes.
Is he?
Yep.
Because I've never seen him. I don't know, but I remember hearing him speak.
I've actually never heard him speak, but I discovered him on Twitter, of all places. He just was one of the first people when I got onto that social media network who really stood out, that every single time I ran across something that he had to say, it was relevant, it was biblical, it was just on point. So I'm thrilled that he's going to be speaking for us on intersectionality.
Yeah. I think what we need to be proud of, and that's why I mentioned that he's black, I think we have 2 black speakers, 3 women, and the rest are males. But this is quite a variety of kinds of speakers, and I'm proud of that.
We're very diverse. and we should just comment that we have a woman, and we have a Brit, and we have a Jew on this podcast.
That's true.
We're
very inclusive.
Well, we have somebody from the UK. That's right. Erwin is in Germany and has been there for many, many years. So we do have all kinds of cultural witnesses as well. The Canadian and American. So this
we
is
have Andrea.
That's one, the UK.
Yeah.
Okay, you better keep talking and tell us who the others are, Josh.
All right, so then we have Stephen Shavura coming back, and he'll be dealing with the
Australia. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
We're multinational.
And then Goddard. Aowen is your daughter, and she'll be tackling the issue of male and female, but specifically patriarchy and feminism.
Yep.
And then we have Andrea Williams, who is over at Christian Concern, and she'll be dealing with law and personhood.
Over where?
I'm sorry?
You said she's over at Christian Concern. Where is that?
And Christian Concern is in the United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's an important ministry in the United Kingdom that tries to keep in touch with what's happening in the UK in terms of cultural changes. And these people are lawyers, and they're in touch with people in the Parliament and the House of Lords and everything else. They're very well-connected people. And she's the founder of that movement. And she knows absolutely everybody in the United Kingdom worth knowing. And the fact that she's going to be speaking to us about that situation, I think, is going to be absolutely wonderful, because she brings a personal testimony to the situation of a once Christian nation that is unique, it seems to me, and she needs to be heard.
Yes.
I could not agree more. There is so much that is coming out from the United Kingdom about, you said that her topic was law and personhood.
Mhm.
And as you see the Tavistock Clinic, the headlines coming out about how they've had to retract so much of what they were doing in the name of this transgender movement, so much of the damage that they did to young women in the name of transgender ideology. You see potential foster and adoptive parents who are denied parental opportunities for children because they profess a biblical Christian faith. There's just so much happening there. And then it seems too that their speech codes are much more troublesome as well than we deal with here in the United States at all. I mean, there are people who have been arrested simply for reading the word of God on public street corners because people found it offensive and thought of it as hate speech. So to hear Andrea speak about this is really going to be helpful.
Christian Concern goes to trial with them and provides lawyers to speak on their behalf. So they're doing amazing work.
So are they kind of like the Alliance Defending Freedom just for the
That's
UK?
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up is Mark Robinson, who spoke at our last year's symposium, and he'll be dealing with education and the shaping of identity.
I'm so excited to hear Mark talk about this. He was so fantastic last year, and he has such a wealth of information about teaching and catechizing. I cannot wait to hear what he has to say about this topic.
And he comes he is a teaching elder in the PCA. So he's a minister, but he also on the side is a teacher for junior high and high school.
Right.
And
I can't wait to talk to him. I hope I'm on the Q&A panel he's on, because what he's talking about is the antidote to what I'm going to be talking about, I think, in many instances. And I cut you off because I'm excited. Go on.
No. I think, right. I think, and that's a good point. I'm glad that you said that. We need to make sure that happens, that you guys are on the same panel.
Please do.
And our last speaker, but definitely not least, who is also a rookie, is Emilio Ramos, and he is a pastor in Texas, and he has a YouTube channel that creates apologetic content. Now, Emilio, his subject is the Metaverse and personal identity.
Excellent.
And I'm really excited about what Emilio is going to bring, because I had just finished doing an interview with him for the podcast. The guy is sharp. He knows what's going on and what's around the bend. You will not want to miss that. So, Dr. Jones, how did you meet Emilio?
It's interesting. I had no clue who he was, but I got a telephone call from a certain Emilio Ramos saying he wanted to make a video of me. And I wasn't that crazy about doing it, but he insisted somehow. He insisted. He came out. He spent 2 days out here. He had equipment worth $50,000 with which he was filming him interviewing me. I hope it's worth the money. But, especially from my answers anyway, but his questions were excellent. No, he's a very bright man. He's not just a technician and somebody who tries to produce movies and videos. How many videos did you say Josh he has on his site?
Almost 500.
500.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Bob.
The site is called Red Grace, I think.
Red Grace. Bob is reading a book right now called The Return of the God Hypothesis.
Oh yeah,
And
that Stephen Mayer.
yes, Stephen Mayer. So
Brilliant.
he talks about this idea of the multiverse, and I'd really never gone much beyond thinking about the multiverse in the terms of like the cartoon Spider-Man episode that, we watched with our kids. But it is this theory that is taking root in certain people's minds. And so hearing that come up in Stephen Meyer's interviews about the return of the God hypothesis made me think, oh, this is possibly something that we're going to need to contend with. So I'm delighted that that's what Emilio is going to be talking about.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Stephen Mayer is much more of a philosopher, actually, and well, a scientist.
Yes.
He is a scientist. He's well instructed in all kinds of geological science. He's
right.
a brilliant young man.
Right.
Emilio is more of a theologian, actually.
Yeah. Actually, Mary, I hate to disappoint you.
Oh, you said multiverse. Don't take it back, Joshua.
Metaverse.
Oh.
But multiverse does play into verse.
Okay.
But
well, I'm still excited.
we are talking about an age where people are disconnecting from reality and they're logging on,
right?
And they're having church experience, they're having restaurant experience, they're having shopping experience, they're having community, all the time, and it's all
online.
It's not real.
Yeah.
Right. You don't like how you look? Well, get a new avatar.
Yeah.
So there's hope for Peter and me. We can have hair.
Right.
Look at all my hair.
Stephen is an expert in discussing quantum physics, which most people can't ever even understand.
No.
So I don't know whether you meant metaverse. What did you say, Mary?
I thought Joshua had said multiverse.
Multiverse, because I think he would include that in quantum physics.
Yes. Yeah, he does. And well, now Emilio's his context and his topic make a lot more sense. But no, the metaverse is a big deal. I remember listening to an interview with a father whose daughter had really been sucked into this metaverse idea. And he was remonstrating with her about the need to get a job and to kind of emerge into the real world again after the COVID shutdowns. And she said to him, Dad, I can have any house I want online. I can look any way I want online. I can choose exactly who I want to be. Why go fight it out in the real world when I can just pay for it online? She really didn't see the value of working on her real world life because her online life was so much easier and made her so much happier in her mind.
Does Emilio get into transgenderism?
He's going to touch on that because the metaverse does really, because it's all about avatars.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy with who you are, right, your body type, whether you're a male or a female or that, you just change it.
You don't even have to be human.
That's right. And you look down and you're wearing these goggles and this is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it plays in the realm of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
I meant to say something else. I chose the wrong word. Transhumanism was what I needed to say.
Yep. This is the transhumanism movement.
Peter, you were just trying to make me feel better about my mistake. And that's so gentlemanly of you.
It's easy to make a mistake, though. Transgenderism and transhumanism. Transhumanism is the goal that some scientists have of blending the computer to human minds and to actually take over the next stage of evolution that they claim has happened via the use of computer science.
Right.
So we will become those connected in our brains to computers. And so we
Yeah.
will transition to a higher form of humanity, hence transhumanism.
Yeah. Another one of those things that 10 years ago seemed completely implausible. And here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Emilio, very interesting fellow, has an interesting non-Christian past, I think was amazingly converted from a very weird kind of past, and is just full of good ideas and thoughts. So he's going to do a great job, Josh, I
Excellent.
think. Have you already interviewed him?
I have. Yeah, I've interviewed most of the speakers at this point, so I'm very aware of a good flavor of how this event is going to turn out. And this is one that our listeners, our watchers, and our readers are not going to want to miss. It will be made available so that you can, like our last symposium, you can make use of it for a Sunday school format. So be on the lookout for more episodes to come out soon on this symposium.
Yeah.
Any more speakers?
That's it.
Did Mary, did you read Eowyn's article?
No, it's literally on my desk. I need to read it today. So that's what I'll be doing actually when we're done.
It's a really, really great article. The article is Bone of My Bone and Flesh of My Flesh, how the creation of Eve's body foreshadows the formation of the church. I'm going to say this real quick, Dr. Jones, and then you could brag on your daughter a bit. But it was really wonderful reading this article that Eowyn wrote, because in it, I could hear Dr. Jones, and it's a wonderful testimony of Dr. Jones's work and flowering in within his daughter's work. And then, of course, the way Eowyn writes, if you've ever read Eowyn's blog, A.O. Wiggles, I think it was called.
Yeah.
She has the tone and the wordsmithing of her mom. And
Yes.
so Becca is just such a wonderful writer, as we all know.
Yeah.
And so it was a really fantastic piece to read. So that's all I've
now, all I will say is that I had no intention of getting any of my children involved in what we do at TruthXChange, but she sent me this 19-page article a few weeks ago, and I didn't know it was coming. I read it, and it blew me away. I thought,
that's wonderful.
This is the way we need to think about women in terms of the biblical eschatology and the key role of women in our lives and so on. She's just done a wonderful job. And I thought we have to have this as part of our looking at the question of identity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the reason why I suggested her, not because she's my daughter.
Well, you were worried about that, but I can speak for the rest of the staff that all of us were on board just because we know what Eowyn's like. We know about her ministry with her husband. We know about, we just know Eowyn.
Who, by the way, is getting back home today from Krakow, Poland.
Oh, excellent.
Where he had been helping the folks, the immigrants from the Ukraine.
Yes.
Find places to live and so on. So,
well, and they've had so much experience with refugees, haven't they, because of their time in Germany,
right?
Already. So that's marvelous.
Yeah. So we have done all the speakers.
We've done all the speakers, and this wraps up our episode for this podcast.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for coming on, and Mary, of course. I don't want to say you're because you're not.
I think that those who follow this symposium will be greatly instructed by, is it 8 lectures?
9
lectures dealing with this incredibly important subject of identity.
Yes.
In various ways, and giving Christians, I think, a wide view of the question. And I think making a case for biblical identity.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes,
So
the value of it, the joy of it,
Yeah.
truly.
And it is absolutely crucial that this be done now. And God in his providence caused us to think of this subject, and we're preparing it now. And I do think it will be of tremendous success.
Excellent.
9 lectures, 9 pre-seminar lectures, and then we'll have 2 Q&A panels. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for joining us again.
All right.
It's always nice to
Good
talk
to
to you,
both.
Dr. Jones.